Hey, and good recording to Glue Wednesday, because I know most people are watching the broadcast rather than being here actually live with me. But you know what? Think about it. In some way, even though it's a broadcast, you're still live because you're living. And isn't that part of what we want to talk about when we talk about Glue? Glue Wednesday, GLUE, God's love undoes everything. And I created that based on the fact that Wednesday is not hump day, but it's the glue day. It's the day that keeps the traditional 7-day week together by keeping the beginning and the end as a connecting point. So, hey, what's up, Curtis, New York in the house? What's up, Fruity? All right, New York again. And then, hey, what's up, Linda? There's Chicago in the house. As you know, and as you can see up in my intro to this session, that I'm dedicating today's show to my good friend, Greg Hinton, who we just lost on Sunday. And so, one of the things so actually I say to you also, what better time to exhibit how glue works. Glue Wednesday, God's love undoes everything. Right now, there are a lot of people, a lot of my good friends in Chicago who are hurting and posting things about Greg. But the one thing that I remind them of is that how much we love Greg. The beauty of it is that these people are not saying these things based on sudden death of Greg. A lot of people gave him his props while he was alive. So, but I'm not going to over focus on Greg. I'm going to use him, but I'm talking today about the actual whole concept of loss, because loss tends to throw a lot of us in a tailspin. A lot of people aren't good at handling death or loss of a loved one. I have actually spoken at 18 funerals, and I have always considered that just a great blessing and an honor to be asked to speak at one. So let me go to my notes for what I prepared today. And one is that one that I have posted up top, but I didn't post when I put the announcement. And that is, in retrospect, we grow from within from what we must do without. Because see, we now must have a loss as a physical loss in the case of a death. We have to find a way to go on without that person's physical presence in our lives. And that's where we're feeling the loss. So that's why we go to my acronym for loss, which is LOSS, little obstacles, strength, and spirits. Because when we have that big loss in our life, and we've all experienced losses, when we have that big loss in our life, we don't believe we can go on. If it's almost like the Fred Stanford thing of, oh, Elizabeth, here's the big one, I'm coming, right? We may not actually say that, I can't go on without this person, but our body language says it. And our spirits get down, that we've lost this person. I always talk about my biggest loss was the loss of my mother. And I use that, I lost my mother at 52, but let's not act like I didn't have a bunch of losses along the way. And that was my first loss. It wasn't, but it's the biggest loss in my life. And that still doesn't minimize any of the all other losses in my life, because all of those have been the biggest loss in their moment. And that's why I say little obstacle, strength, and spirits, because I say when we have that loss, it's huge, because it's bam, it impacted our day. It threw our whole schedule off. Your whole things to do list just got changed. But as you grow through time, because P.S., by the way, you don't really have a choice. You cannot reverse God's decision and his will of taking that person out of your life. So you will now have to learn to live without that person in your life. So as you mature and you start to do things, you have to find a way to take that loss on in a different way. So what I like to do is tell a story about him. When one of the first things that came to my mind when my mother died, would you believe it, was actually certain meals that I wasn't going to get. And not that I minimize my mother's life to a meal, but those of you who know me and know my mother, y'all know she could cook. And so I actually thought about the fact that I wasn't going to get my okra soup, which is, I loved how Leah cooked that. And what I did, though, is as I look back, because with wisdom being a retrospect, and I look at how I handle that, and I decided, you know what? I'm not going to go through my life without that meal. without making okra. I'm going to figure out how to make it. And by the way, if you haven't had okra soup, it's similar to how when people have gumbo, where they have whether it's seafood gumbo or regular gumbo, and okra is one of the ingredients in gumbo. And so that's kind of how Leah made it with the tomato sauce and everything. Oh man. And I said, I'm not doing without that because I love the way she made that. So I had to think about, I said, I'm going to have to learn how to make that rather than me go through life without having it. So I had my flashback of, thinking about her cooking it, right? So when I made it, I'm like measuring how much of this and putting this and letting this thaw out and season it. And then the flashback to when Leah used to cook it, she's having a conversation and seasoning it and throwing it all behind her back. She's just talking and laughing and cooking it. And it came out great. Now, when I did it with all my measuring and time, putting on the timer and everything, it didn't come out the same way. But it came out pretty good. And guess what? Each time I made my okra or any of the meals that I remember that she used to cook that I wanted to learn how to cook, it got better. And it got better. And so don't you see that what actually happened is that huge obstacle of the loss of my mother, and in this case, the meals that I wasn't going to get, it ends up, in retrospect, it became a little obstacle because I still had to go on being who I was. I still had to go on living my life. And so I got stronger because the thing is, even when I talk about comparing the loss to a meal, we all take our family for granted. There are people in our lives that we don't say thank you enough. We just expect that they're going to be there, and this is who does that for me. And we're not taking advantage of them, by the way. It's just that's how we live. And so we take a lot of people for granted in our lives, and especially the closer they are to us, the more we take advantage of them. And so when they're gone, that's why it's such a huge obstacle. But once we learn to replace them, because once I learned how to cook those meals that I didn't want to miss, I brought my mother back. See, I was cooking ceremonially while she was just cooking for flavor and survival and feeding her family. I made it a ceremony. And when I cooked, I thought about her. So don't you see what I was doing was I was strengthening my spirit. So the big loss of her life became a little obstacle because it was something that made me change direction and recognize that how important it is not to take people for granted. Thank God I was able to do, to give myself some self-reflection and a reference check and realize I had not taken my mother for granted. So that's really what happens a lot of times in death is we go back and we think about how we treated the person, and that can impact how we are going to learn to live without that person. Because you are going to have to learn to live without it. So I was able to do a self-inventory and see that I hadn't taken it for granted, as well as it made me think about all of the people like you in my life who I also don't take for granted. And or if there were some that I was taking for granted, that was my reminder to not do it. Because that, we all love the cliches about, here today, gone tomorrow, hey, you could be gone any minute. And then we don't live as if we do. We still have all this hatred and anger going on. And when we are, in fact, not promised tomorrow. So that was my big loss. And so what I want to do is one of the things that I introduced when I announced this broadcast is how important it is for us to now use what I call the album of memories. The album of memories, because once somebody dies, that actually, isn't that what happened? Oh man, I remember when we used to do this. And and we see that people start posting their pictures of memories of times that they spent with them. Well, even if you don't have the physical pictures, that's what you get in your mind. I call it an album of memories because that's what we start doing is thinking about all the good times we had with that person. And instead of us focusing on the fact that those good times are now gone, now is really the time to see that memory of, wow, that was a great time we had. And now you can feel, that's how you can begin to strengthen your spirit. That's why I say the album of memory seeds the new path that we have to take. Because the minute you get the announcement of the pain, of the loss, that's when the grieving process starts. That's when the healing process starts as well, because you immediately you cry, and then sooner or later you're going to stop crying. And so, so you begin the healing process the moment you get the bad news, because you go right into how you feel about the person and how you're going to mourn. And then you have to eventually come out of that feeling so that you can, more consciously continue the healing. So those of you who are still in mourning for whatever loss you had, number one, never feel bad about that. No emotion is wrong. And in fact, the worst thing we can do is hold back an emotion. So if you're feeling a great loss, go on and get a good cry out. As I wrote to one of my friends, Jennifer Robinson, when she had posted how she was in tears thinking about the loss of Greg, and I said, Jennifer, be sure to let any tears walk you right into the laughter of some of the fun he created. See, even as we mourn, we usually may have tears, but then we also have tears of joy. So as you're thinking about somebody, as you're crying about a loss, after a while, start thinking about it, and then think about why you feel in such a loss and some of the crazy stuff that you did with that person, and let those tears of pain turn into tears of joy, because that's where you want to end your thought with each person, is what was the joy that I had with this person. That's the real thing that I want to see and help me recover. But I'm going to move on to Greg in a minute by first seeding just a little bit more about my loss of Leah, how I create my album of memories. Well, one of the things that I do is I have, I still talk to her. See, so that's one of the things that you want to do in terms of how can you begin your healing process from any loss, your album memory. I still talk to my mother every single day, just about. I use her name in 90% of my passwords. And now I just realized that I use her name in 90% of my passwords. And here's my list of the different sites that I have online and my password. Yeah, this is how many different things I have to have a password on. It's 3 pages, 3 full pages, plus one more half a page. And I put that on a Word document. And I keep it next to my desk for when I can't remember a password. But 90% of these, Leah's name is in there somehow. See, so that's a way of what you can do to keep your album of memories going from a person, a loved one that you've lost. And then in the kitchen, I've got 5 things hung on my kitchen cabinets about Leah. Her picture. I got a picture on the refrigerator, her birthday cake hanging on the thing, and then some tributes that I actually wrote for her when after her funeral, and shared with a lot of my friends and family, both at the funeral and at a memorial we did for her every year. So I'm going to read some of those to you to show, just so I can. This is what I keep my spirit, because that's the thing. Remember, a little obstacle strengthens spirits. So it's always about us trying to find a way to strengthen our spirit. So one of the things that we do, Leah used to, my mother used to babysit a lot of kids. So, and when she babysat, it was sitting. Yeah, she sat in the kitchen. I was her office, and she sat in the kitchen, and that's where she gave her directives from. So I created this funny thing called Leah's Kitchen and Child Rearing Center. And went down and contributed, got contributions from some of my family, and of just things that we heard her say to the kids as she was helping them in Leah's Kitchen and Family Child Raising Center. So I created this and said, we sent this out to people when they decide to bring their kid in for Leah to babysit. I'm not going to use them all, but just some of the quotes and like I say, the things that I remember from my mother, so that my tears of pain can turn to tears of joy. And one of the things she used to say, when you say, Mommy, I'm hungry, she'd say, yeah, pleased to meet you, I'm Mary Louise. And a lot of people have heard that, say, Mommy, I'm hungry, pleased to meet you, I'm Mary Louise. And if we said we wanted some more meat, when we were eating, I want some more meat, she'd say, you better meet your Jesus. All right, and then when she said, this was her rule, she said, when you get grown enough to run this house, you get out. And I love that one, because when I think about the hardest job in the world, parenting, and what people are going through with their kids, we're getting to the point where we're enabling our children. But but that's another topic. But she said, when you get grown enough to run this house, and I'm ready for her to say, then I'll turn the rain over. She said, you get out. She said, I'm the only one that runs this house. Who's running your house? See, that's one of the things that you have to realize, that the grieving process requires you finding a way to get back to who you are. And so whatever you can find to pull yourself back into being who you are, that's what's going to help you the most. So when you get grown enough to run this house, you get out. That was hilarious. Then I had another one. So that's what, and if you can see, I've got her picture watermarked in the background of that. So yes, I see some likes, as y'all know Leah. And there's a lot more on that list that I didn't read. Then one day I sent out an email and to my friends on Facebook and some family, and I said, look, I want to put together a thing about some quotes that we got from Leah. And so a couple of people other than my family sent some, and I decided, let me give you a couple of them. One of them was our good friend, one of my sisters that I grew up with in Grant, Jean Griffin. Jean submitted that one of the things that she always remembers Leah saying, close that damn door. This ain't no barn. Because when someone would come into our house, if they didn't close the door, she said, a barn, you just go in and out and you leave the door open. But that was one thing, because she's screaming from the kitchen to close the door. This ain't a barn. So Jean remembered that. Then my niece, Nashay wrote, I remember when I was younger and had said that I wanted to kill myself. Grandma said, okay, I want you to go right now and jump in front of the #1 train while me and everyone else in the building looks out the window and waves goodbye. You ready? Go. And Nashay said she stood there and looked, and that changed her mind about deciding to kill herself. And I'm not saying, obviously, with October coming up and being National Suicide Awareness Month, that's not really the secret to keeping somebody from taking their life by suicide. But you see the joy and the craziness of what my mother used to say to people, and what stuck with their mind, and what stopped them from doing certain things or encouraged them to do certain things. You never know which one. All right. And then but then and this one, that's my blue one. That's got a lot of funny things on there as well. And then I've got another one with a lot of funny things on there as well. So my mother said some funny things, but here's some wonderful things that really touched our heart that she said also. And she said, child, let me make you laugh, which is what she usually start off talking about something that she wanted to talk about. Child, let me make you laugh. And then she'd say, God love you, baby. And because a lot of people would come, even though I'm talking about how she used to raise children sitting in her kitchen, a lot of people, when they had problems, they come and sit down with my mother and tell her about what they were going through, and she would walk them through feeling good. And her faith was always one thing that was strong. And that's what she said, God love you, baby. And then she'd also say, thank you, darling. Oh, no, I'm going to save that one for last. Then Brianna said, my niece Brianna said, and this is something that I shared at her funeral, she said, one of the most important things she'd say is something that reminded me, something that my niece Brianna reminded me of last night. Leah always took the time to say, bless you. My mother always said, bless you to people. And that's an important thing that we have to do, is remember to bless people by being who we are and showing up as we are. And that's why actually the last quote I want to use that she said is, she said, because you said, oh, Mama King, we just love you. She said, thank you, darling. I just wish there were more like me. I'm not choked up about saying it, but y'all know. So those of you who have met me in different parts of my life, and you know how my spirit is, that's part of where I got it from, the craziness of my mother and my father too, and the people around me. Who you surround yourself with makes a difference. So as we go on talking about loss, that was my biggest loss, and those are some of the ways I use to create my album of memories about my mother, the biggest loss in my life. But I've got plenty of other people who I've lost and things that I've lost that I'm able to attach something to remind me that this was a gift and a blessing that they brought into my life, and that God has now put me on a new path where I have to not worry about whether or not I was taking advantage or taking them for granted, but recognizing that I used the steering wheel that they supplied, the new guidance that they gave me, the new light on the path that they showed me so I can continue to be who I am. And thank goodness to be able to bring you this broadcast. So now I move on to, so that was the loss of my mother. My loss of Greg, who we just lost on Sunday. One of Greg Hinton, he gave me my first speaking engagement. I've been in the speaking business now 24 years, and this brother, he believed in me. We were friends. He gave me my first paid speaking engagement. And every year I would either send him a text or an email thanking him on the anniversary of my first engagement, which was June 10th, 1995. That was my first paid speaking engagement. And so every year he and I would celebrate that. He was also my good buddy and my partner on Real Man Cook, which was Yvette Moyle, our good spiritual sister, and Kofi Moyle. We always did Real Man Cook, which is a charity that started in Chicago. It's in, I think, 10 markets now, or I don't know how many markets it's in nationally, but it's every Father's Day. And it's a time where fathers get together, the fathers cook, and you can go around to the different tables and get a sample. You need to go to realmancook.org and find out what that's all about. But that's another thing that we shared. And him, myself, and Reggie Carter, his lifelong childhood friend, us three became partners. And again, we thank Cheryl Pearson McNeil, because at the time she was with NBC, and they sponsored us as the cooks for NBC in Real Man Cook. As you're seeing, by the way, these names, I'm not name dropping, I'm showing you how we connect. Everything we do in our life becomes another connection. And therefore, we keep blessing someone else because we've been blessed by someone else, because no one's been blessed singularly by themselves. You're blessed through somebody and with somebody. You cannot live this life alone. And that's why when we have a loss, we may feel alone, but the truth is we are one of the people who has now lost that person. And now what we want to do is, again, find ways to rebuild ourselves and reconnect and recognize that this loss is always bigger than the one person. It's always about how we are now going to get stronger based on the loss of one person. So even as I say, another connection, when Greg gave me my first speaking engagement, see, my business was based on the use of poetry. I created my speaking business where I would read my poem and then talk about it. So I'm going to recite the first poem that I used in marketing my business, as well as during my first speaking engagement. And it's also the title poem of my first published book. It's called I Found Out I'm Dying. And it's about that. It's about the fact that physically we're all dying from the day we're born. Get over it. One day you won't be here. So the key is in the last 4 lines as you hear of this poem. But the joy for me is that that was the base of my message as a speaker, coming from my poetry. And I see that I am still online for delivering that message. So today I deliver it again on behalf of my good friend Greg Hinton, because this is what I used in my first ever paid speaking engagement. I found out I'm dying. You see, actually, I've known it for quite some time now. But for so many others, it's new news. So I'd like to thank you, God, for yesterday, as much as I do for today. And I ask that you, my friends, pause, but not stop, to think about some of the wild things I've survived before this, my greatest challenge. And believe me, death is the only challenge we won't sit and talk about or relive. But we can find joy in it. Joy because there'll be enough kind words at the funeral to create a new dictionary. Kind words that I need now more than ever. You see, kind words keep us alive, physically, mentally, spiritually. I found out I'm dying. And when I woke up this morning, I wept. Then I laughed aloud and started to sing, but remember that I couldn't. So I danced instead. And I whistled a tune as I made my bed. I threw open the window and let out a cheer. Actually, I just smiled so no one could hear. I exercised and ate and dressed after I washed. Then I looked in the mirror and gave myself a wink. Not bad for a body that survived another day. I'm so blessed to get older is all I could think. I didn't bother reading the obituary because I knew I wasn't there. Instead, I clipped my fingernails and neatly styled my hair. I found out I'm dying and that I have been since day number one. So I spend little time regretting my life because I'd rather spend the time having fun. Thank you. Click, click, snap, snap, snap. But that's the whole point. I spend little time regretting my life because I'd rather spend the time having fun. And even as you see the post on Greg's page, and those of us who were friends of him, you hear they're talking about the fun that they had. That's what we miss for the most part when we have the loss of a loved one in our life. It's the fun. So find a way to get back to focusing on that fun, and that's how you can help yourself with the recovery process that you need, that you need to continue the recovery process. Know that you're going to die one day, and it's okay. But what mark are you leaving on this world? I think that, again, I'm so happy that I see a lot of the people on posting on Greg's page are people who gave him his flowers while he was here. I don't think he's feeling upset at all. He made his mark, and people thanked him now. So who can you thank? This is your album of memories. Don't let your album of memories have people in there who you didn't finish thanking or you didn't show them enough appreciation. Also, with my first speaking engagement, other than the poetry, I had a speech that I had used in the Toastmaster speech contest called How to Be Ugly. And ugly was unique, gifted, lovable you. So I'm wearing this t-shirt today to commemorate and thinking about my good buddy Greg in this broadcast. But it's also, now as you can see, heyugly.org, which is a good friend. Oops, these things are opposite. A good friend of mine, Betty, there we go. Betty Hefner, she loved the speech so much that she created the movement called heyugly.org, which is for teens and tweens going through self-esteem issues. So it helps them talking about bullying, suicide, drug prevention. She and Greg became friends as well because he appreciated the message, and so did she. So again, another connection. And that was, again, when I think about my first paid speaking engagement, was both with my poetry and the use of heyugly.com. So heyugly.org. So please support that as my pet charity as well. So then I mentioned Real Men Cook. So these are things in my album of memories with Greg. And then so lastly, he was one of my recipients. My volunteer work was done with the Boys and Girls Club of Chicago, the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Club of the Boys and Girls Club of Chicago. Shout out to them. It's important to volunteer in your life, people. You know, we always talk about giving back, but are we giving back? See, once you give back, it's going to be a lot easier for you to recognize that you gave people their flowers while they were here. Because sometimes you just connect with somebody, or you just do something based on the favor in your heart through that volunteerism. And Greg was a great supporter of mine, helping me with my Boys and Girls Club. I nominated and we awarded him with the Dr. Martin Luther King Legacy Award one year, and he just did a great job of helping us raise funds and making some good connections for the club that they will still remember and benefit from. So there's a lot of kids there whose lives that he touched who don't even know him, and he didn't know. In fact, the giving person that he was, on his site last week before he died, one of his last two posts was asking people to support a charity that was being handled by a fraternity. Now, Greg was Omega Psi Phi, but there was a fraternity that was having a fundraiser, and he asked people to support that fundraiser, even though it wasn't his fraternity. And he even put that in there. This is not my fraternity, but the cause is an important one. And it was a cause for helping youth, I believe. So I didn't write that down because it just came to my mind, so I can go back and look and see what it was. But that's the kind of person he was. It doesn't matter what my affiliation is. If I've got a good cause, if I see a good cause, I want to support that. And are we doing that in our lives? Are we supporting the things that we think are important? And we support them through kindness, not through anger or arrogance. And those are two terms that you can know. Those who knew Greg and who knew my mother, they weren't angry or arrogant people. They were both persons. And oh my God, they were both Leos. And they stood up for what they believed. They let you know where they stood. And they let you know that God was the base of why they stood where they stood. So create your album of memories. One thing that I always post when someone says they lost a loved one, and I always say to them, I'm praying in faith, not fear, for your smooth recovery from your loss at a time where speed cannot heal. I don't say have a speedy recovery because speed cannot heal. I'm just word sensitive. You can feel free to still tell people have a speedy recovery, but I ask you to try to really pray for them to have a smooth recovery, because sometimes a speedy recovery is not going to heal the spiritual wound, even though sometimes it won't even heal a physical wound. So, really let's be conscious of the words we use, but let's find ways to share those words and lift other people's lives up. So I'm really glad to say that I have no plan of getting over the loss of my mother. I have no plan of getting over the loss of Greg, my good friend, and I have no plan of getting over the loss of any of the good friends that I've lost over the years. What I plan and appreciate is that I make my life about learning to live with it and to strengthen my belief and my trust in God's will, because God's will is what directs my life. When people say, well, the devil is busy, and I say, well, that's his damn business, because the devil does not control my life. He doesn't have a say-so or a place in my life. Everything that happens to my life is of God, good or bad or good, because I want to end on the good note as often as possible. So what better time for me to bring you a message of glue, recognizing that God's love undoes everything, including the loss of a loved one, by helping you see that loss is LOSS. It's just a little obstacle that strengthens your spirit. Now that you have to take a new direction, how do you feel about yourself? Pat yourself on the back, give yourself credit for making it through another moment as you move on to making it through another day without that person. Try not to focus on the loss. Try instead to find the gain. And that's how we can deal with the losses that we have to have in our life, whether physical, emotional, spiritual, or financial. So thank you for tuning in to Glue every week. I'll look forward to seeing you next week. Remember, you can always leave me a message in the thread about a topic you'd like me to cover. You can send me an inbox message. Something like this, I didn't need a request. This is an important day in my life, and to share this message and make it a tribute to one of my good friends, it was important to me. It was a great honor and possibility for me to be in place to do it. So always smiling, always glad to know that Glue and you will make a good two. I made that up. It didn't work. Don't worry about it. All right. See you next week. God bless you, and all is well. Ciao. You know what? Let me just quickly look and see if there's comments that I can answer in the now. Hey, what's up? Yeah, oh, okay. All of you in the Bahamas. Good for you, man. Checking in. I went to Planet Fitness the other night. Inventorying yourself is so serious. Yes. Do a self-check. Stop saying, well, what's so-and-so and so. What about you? What did you do? We always contribute to a challenge and a solution. Stop and figure out what part you played in. Good afternoon from Goose Creek, South Carolina. Hey, Bishop Fulton Parham. And Greg was one of the guys who introduced me to Parhams in Chicago as well. Your family there. Hey, Gertrude. God, cancer. Oh, God. Cancer-free. Amen. All right, Gertrude, glad to hear it. All right, Mac B in the house. Ollie, I should have had a mini speaker so the people around to hear you. I'm connected to positive people, letting others know how to feel about yourself. Thank you, Ollie. Yeah. Why don't you have your speaker, right? But the key is make sure you share that message and you be that connection. I appreciate wanting to share the message. But that's it, you know, and I hope y'all see what he's saying is he wish he had a speaker because he's at the Bahamas. He wanted people to hear the message. Guess what? You are the speaker. Choose your messages carefully, because once you go out, you're going to say something that you heard, and you're going to pass that along to somebody else. So all of us be the speakers, not the speaker, but the speaker that magnifies and amplifies the message that's going to send a message to other people and help them out so much. And that's why it's great to end on Gertrude's comment. You are so awesome. Glad you are in my life. Say that to your mirror and recognize that you got a lot of people that you can say that to. You are so awesome. And I'm glad to have you in my life. Thank you. And I'll see you next week on Glue Wednesday. Ciao.